7 Golden Age Hollywood actors that ruined their careers with one interview. These weren't misquotes or tabloid distortions. These were self-inflicted wounds. Actors who sat down for what should have been routine publicity and instead said things so shocking, so offensive, or so tone-deaf that the industry turned on them overnight. In an era before social media, these interviews lived forever in newspapers, magazines, and the memories of studio executives who held all the power. During Hollywood's golden age, the studio system controlled everything: your image, your interviews, your reputation. Publicity was carefully managed by professionals who knew exactly what to say and what to hide. But when these actors went off script, spoke their true minds, or simply had too much to drink before sitting down with a journalist, they discovered just how quickly fame could evaporate. Drop a comment and tell us which Golden Age actor you think said the most career-ending thing on record. Starting with number 7. Number 7. Robert Mitchum, Georgia chain gang prisoner at 16, freight train hopper during the Depression. Robert Mitchum's sleepy-eyed stare wasn't an act. It was the look of a man who'd lived harder by age 20 than most people do in a lifetime. By the late 1940s, he'd become one of Hollywood's most bankable tough guys, starring in film noir classics like Out of the Past, and building a reputation as the real deal in a town full of pretenders. Then came September 1948. Police raided a small house in Laurel Canyon and arrested Mitchum along with actress Layla Leeds for possession of an illegal substance. In an era when such charges could destroy a career overnight, the smart move would have been contrition, remorse, maybe some tears for the cameras. Mitchum did the opposite. During his jail interviews, he turned the whole thing into a comedy routine. When reporters asked how he was handling incarceration, he quipped, "It's just like Palm Springs but without the riffraff." He joked about the jail food, critiqued the accommodations, and generally acted like he was reviewing a hotel rather than facing serious criminal charges. RKO Studios was horrified. This wasn't a scandal they could bury. Mitchum's attitude made that impossible. The studio system had ways of making problems disappear, but only if the star played along. Mitchum seemed determined to prove he didn't care what anyone thought. Studio executives seriously considered dropping his contract, knowing that his cavalier approach could poison his box office appeal. Here's the twist: it didn't destroy him. Audiences actually loved his bad boy authenticity. The indifference that should have ended his career somehow made him more appealing. But Mitchum got lucky. In less forgiving circumstances, with different studio heads or a less forgiving public, those flippant jail interviews could have been his last. Number 6. Frances Farmer's. Frances Farmer had everything Hollywood wanted in the 1930s. Striking looks, genuine acting talent, and an intelligence that set her apart from the typical starlet. Her performance in Come and Get It caught the attention of major studios, and by her early 20s, she seemed destined for major stardom. But Farmer had one fatal flaw for a Golden Age actress. She refused to pretend. It started in 1931, before she was even famous. As a college student, she won an essay contest that included a trip to the Soviet Union. Most people would have downplayed that later, especially as anti-communist sentiment grew in America. Farmer did the opposite. In multiple interviews throughout the late 1930s, she spoke openly about what she'd seen, praising aspects of the Soviet system at a time when doing so was becoming increasingly dangerous. She told Photoplay magazine that American capitalism was a dying system. She called Hollywood superficial and morally bankrupt, in interviews that studio publicists desperately tried to suppress. Paramount Pictures had invested considerable money in building her career, and she seemed determined to sabotage it with every interview she gave. Studio head executives would coach her on what to say, and she'd go directly to reporters and say the opposite. She criticized the studio system as a factory that destroyed art. She questioned whether American audiences were sophisticated enough to appreciate real cinema. The final straw came in 1942. During a court appearance on a minor traffic violation, she gave an interview that devolved into a profanity-laced tirade against the judge, the legal system, and Hollywood itself. Newspapers printed every word. The woman who could have been one of the decade's biggest stars was now labeled as difficult, unstable, and politically dangerous. Paramount dropped her contract. No other major studio would touch her. What made Farmer's story particularly tragic is that her interview quotes were later used as evidence in commitment hearings. The words she spoke in defiance became legal justification for institutionalization. Her career ended not because she lacked talent, but because she refused to stay quiet about what she believed. She passed away in 1970 at age 56, largely forgotten by the industry that once courted her. Number 5. Fatty Arbuckle. In 1921, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was one of the highest-paid entertainers in the world. His films for Paramount Pictures grossed millions, and his contract guaranteed him over $1 million a year, an astronomical sum for the era. He was second only to Charlie Chaplin in popularity, and at age 34 his future seemed limitless. Then came Labor Day weekend, 1921. Arbuckle threw a party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. A young woman named Virginia Rapay became ill during the party and was taken to a hospital, where she passed away several days later. The circumstances were murky, the evidence contradictory, but the district attorney charged Arbuckle in connection with her passing. The tabloids had a field day. America's beloved comedian was suddenly painted as a monster. 3 separate trials followed. The first 2 ended in hung juries. The third, in April 1922, ended in acquittal, and not just any acquittal. The jury took less than 5 minutes to declare him not guilty, and then did something almost unprecedented. They issued a written apology. "A great injustice has been done him," they wrote. "Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame. Any reasonable person would have taken that vindication, retreated from public view, and let time heal the wounds." Arbuckle gave a triumphant interview to the press immediately after the verdict. He spoke confidently about his return to films. "I'm ready to go back to work," he told reporters with a smile. He discussed plans for new pictures, new contracts, a fresh start. He expressed no bitterness, said he bore no grudges, and confidently predicted that the American public would welcome him back with open arms. He was catastrophically wrong. What Arbuckle failed to understand was that legal innocence meant nothing to the court of public opinion. Women's groups had already organized nationwide boycotts. Church leaders had already condemned him from pulpits across America. Studio executives had already calculated that his name was box office poison. His optimistic interview, full of plans and confidence, made him look tone-deaf to the moral outrage that had consumed the nation. Every newspaper that printed his ready-to-work quotes placed them next to photographs of Virginia Rapay, creating a juxtaposition that made him seem callous rather than vindicated. Paramount refused to release his completed films. Other studios wouldn't hire him. He attempted to work under a pseudonym, but audiences recognized him and theaters refused to book the pictures. The man who'd been earning over $1 million a year was broke within months. He passed away in 1933 at age 46 from heart complications. His career destroyed not by the charges themselves, but by his failure to recognize that perception mattered more than truth. The interview that should have marked his triumphant return became the final nail in his professional coffin. Number 4. Clara Bow. With her signature heart-shaped face, expressive eyes, and boundless energy, Clara Bow defined the 1920s flapper. She was the original it girl, a term literally created to describe her star power. After her 1927 film, it became a massive hit. By 1931, she was the biggest female box office draw in Hollywood, earning $5,000 per week, the equivalent of roughly $90,000 today. Fan magazines couldn't get enough of her. She received more mail than any other actress. She was, in every measurable way, at the absolute peak of her career. She was also exhausted, anxious, and increasingly resentful of the studio system that controlled every aspect of her public image. Paramount Pictures had spent years carefully crafting her persona as fun-loving but fundamentally innocent, a wild child with a heart of gold. Behind the scenes, publicists worked overtime to downplay rumors about her personal life, her struggles with mental health, and her complicated romantic history. Then came the interview that changed everything. In 1931, Clara sat down with a reporter from the Coast Reporter, apparently believing the conversation was off the record. Whether she was naive, tired of the lies, or simply wanted someone to know the real her, she opened up in ways that Hollywood stars of that era simply did not do. She discussed her romantic relationships with various actors and directors in explicit detail. She addressed persistent rumors about her personal life that Paramount had spent enormous sums trying to suppress. She talked about drinking, gambling, and staying out until dawn. She made jokes about her image and her reputation that, when printed verbatim, sounded far more scandalous than she likely intended. The interview was published. Paramount executives were apoplectic. Everything they'd worked to hide was now public record. Women's groups, always ready to attack actresses who stepped outside narrow moral boundaries, called for boycotts. Church groups pressured theater owners. The fan letters that once expressed adoration turned vicious. She was called immoral, a corrupting influence, a disgrace to young women everywhere. What made Clara's situation particularly cruel was the double standard at play. Male actors engaged in the same behavior she described, and worse, with no career consequences. But female stars in the 1930s were held to impossible standards. They could be sexy but not sexual, glamorous but not vain, fun but not wild. Clara's honest interview proved she was human, and that humanity destroyed her. Paramount didn't renew her contract in 1931. She was 26 years old. She attempted a comeback with a few independent films, but the damage was done. By 1933, at just 28, her career was effectively over. She spent the remaining decades of her life in relative seclusion, struggling with mental health issues that were likely exacerbated by the public shaming she'd endured. She passed away in 1965 at age 60, having spent more years out of Hollywood than she'd spent in it. One honest interview with one reporter destroyed the it girl, proving that in Golden Age Hollywood, female stars could be anything except real. Number 3. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was Hollywood's ultimate swashbuckler, the man who made sword fighting look effortless and adventure look glamorous. His performances in Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood made him one of Warner Bros.' biggest stars. Women adored him, men wanted to be him. He seemed to represent everything romantic and daring about Hollywood's golden era. Then came October 1942. Flynn was arrested and charged with serious offenses involving two underage girls, Betty Hansen, age 17, and Peggy Satterley, age 15. The charges were grave. If convicted, he faced significant prison time. The trial became a national sensation, with newspapers covering every detail. Warner Bros. Immediately mobilized their publicity machine to paint Flynn as a wrongly accused gentleman, a victim of false accusations from opportunistic young women. Flynn himself seemed determined to undermine that defense. During the trial, he gave an interview to Photoplay magazine that remains one of the most tone-deaf pieces of celebrity journalism ever published. Instead of expressing appropriate concern or remorse, Flynn came across as annoyed and entitled. He joked about his reputation with women, telling the interviewer, "My biggest crime is being too popular with women." He described the serious criminal charges against him as all a misunderstanding that will blow over. He complained about how the trial was interrupting his film schedule, as if being accused of criminal conduct with minors was primarily an inconvenience to his career. Most damning was his attitude toward the young women making the accusations. He never once expressed concern for them. He discussed his yacht parties where the alleged incidents occurred in ways that made him sound inappropriate rather than victimized. When the interviewer asked about his wild reputation, Flynn essentially confirmed every rumor while denying any actual wrongdoing. His most infamous quote from that interview, "I live by one rule. If it feels good, do it." Warner Bros. Executives were furious. They'd been working to present him as a respectable family man wrongly accused. Flynn's interview made that impossible. The public read his words and saw not a victim but an arrogant playboy who viewed women as conquests and consequences as inconveniences. Even people inclined to believe his innocence found his attitude repulsive. He was acquitted in February 1943. The jury found insufficient evidence to convict, but the verdict didn't matter. The damage from that Photoplay interview was permanent. His box office numbers dropped significantly. Fan mail turned hostile. Women's groups called for boycotts of his films. Warner Brothers continued to employ him, but the quality of his roles declined sharply. By the late 1940s, he was no longer offered leading man parts in major productions. Studios relegated him to B pictures and supporting roles. Flynn passed away in 1959 at age 50 from heart complications. His final years marked by substance issues and increasingly minor roles. His arrogance in that one interview during his trial turned what could have been vindication into confirmation of every negative assumption about his character. He proved that in the court of public opinion, how you respond to accusations matters as much as the accusations themselves. Number 2. Louise Brooks. Louise Brooks had a face that cameras loved. Her signature bobbed hair defined 1920s style. Her performances in films like Pandora's Box demonstrated genuine talent. At age 22, she was on the verge of major stardom, with Paramount Pictures investing heavily in her career. Then she gave an interview that ended it all. The year was 1928, and the film industry was in chaos. The jazz singer had just proven that talking pictures were viable, and studios were scrambling to adapt. Paramount had just finished filming the Canary murder case as a silent picture when they realized it needed to be converted to sound. They sent urgent cables to Brooks, who was in Europe filming Pandora's Box with German director G.W. Pabst, ordering her to return immediately for sound retakes. Brooks refused. That alone would have been problematic, but what she did next was career suicide. She gave an interview to the German press explaining her refusal, and she didn't hold back. She called Paramount executives stupid businessmen who don't understand art. She described Hollywood as a factory system that destroys creativity. She specifically attacked studio head B.P. Schulberg, saying he wouldn't know a good film if it hit him. She told reporters she preferred working in Europe where directors are artists, not accountants. For good measure, she added that American audiences were unsophisticated compared to Europeans, essentially insulting the very people who'd made her famous. The interview was translated and reprinted in American newspapers. Paramount executives read Brooks's words and made an immediate decision. She was done. They dropped her contract. But the punishment didn't stop there. In Hollywood's studio system, the major studios operated almost like a cartel. When one studio blacklisted someone, others typically followed suit. Brooks discovered that no major studio would hire her. She was 22 years old with her whole career ahead of her, and she just destroyed it with one defiant interview. She attempted a comeback in the early 1930s, but the blacklist held firm. The woman who'd been poised to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars couldn't get arrested in Hollywood. She spent the 1930s in financial hardship, working various jobs far removed from the glamour she'd once known. By 1938, at age 31, she'd left the film industry entirely. The cruelest irony is that Brooks was eventually proven right. Film historians later recognized Pandora's Box as a masterpiece, and Brooks' performance as one of the finest of the silent era. She was rediscovered in the 1950s by French film critics who celebrated her artistry, but the recognition came decades too late. Her career was over. She passed away in 1985 at age 78, having spent 47 years outside the industry that should have made her a legend. One interview, one moment of defiance, one decision to speak her mind instead of playing the game. That's all it took to end the career of one of cinema's most gifted performers. She proved that in the studio system, loyalty mattered more than talent, and diplomacy mattered more than truth. Number 1. Charles Chaplin. Charles Chaplin wasn't just a movie star. He was arguably the most famous person on Earth. The little tramp character he created was recognized from New York to Tokyo, from London to Buenos Aires. He'd co-founded United Artists, giving him complete creative control over his films. He'd accumulated enormous wealth. He'd created some of cinema's most enduring masterpieces. At the height of his fame in the 1940s, Chaplin seemed untouchable, but Chaplin had always been politically outspoken, and in the increasingly paranoid atmosphere of 1940s America, that became dangerous. He'd supported the Soviet war effort during World War II. He'd spoken at politically charged rallies advocating for wealth redistribution. He'd made films with social commentary that made conservatives uncomfortable. Still, his fame protected him, until it didn't. In 1942, an aspiring actress named Joan Barry filed a paternity suit claiming Chaplin had fathered her child. The case became a national scandal, and newspapers used it as an opportunity to attack the famous star. Most celebrities facing such accusations would have kept quiet, let their lawyers handle it, and waited for the storm to pass. Chaplin did the opposite. He gave multiple interviews discussing not just the paternity case, but his broader political beliefs. He told reporters he believed in progressive politics and redistribution of wealth. When asked about the Soviet Union, he refused to condemn Stalin, saying he admired certain aspects of their system. He discussed his views on American capitalism, saying the system benefits few while exploiting many. He criticized American foreign policy as imperialistic. In 1942 wartime America, with the country united against fascism and increasingly suspicious of communist influence, these statements were seen as somewhere between unpatriotic and treasonous. The paternity case interviews became platforms for political commentary. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, already suspicious of Chaplin, began building a comprehensive case against him. Newspapers that had once celebrated his genius now attacked him with politically charged headlines. Conservative groups organized boycotts of his films. The quote that haunted him came when a reporter asked directly about his political affiliation. "I am not a member of any political party," Chaplin replied, "but I believe in sharing wealth." To many Americans, that sounded like an admission of radical sympathies. Then came the blood test results in 1943. Medical evidence proved conclusively that Chaplin could not be the biological father of Joan Barry's child. It should have vindicated him. But California law at the time didn't recognize blood tests as admissible evidence. Despite the scientific proof of his innocence, he was ordered to pay child support. The legal victory became a moral defeat in the court of public opinion. The attacks intensified. In 1947, Chaplin was called to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. During his testimony and in subsequent interviews, he remained defiant. "I am not affiliated with any political group," he told reporters. "I am a peace advocate." When pressed about his political associations, he refused to answer, which made him look guilty to a public primed to see communist infiltration everywhere. The final blow came in 1952. Chaplin traveled to London for the premiere of his film Limelight. While his ship was crossing the Atlantic, Attorney General James McGranary revoked his re-entry permit. Chaplin would not be allowed to return to the United States. The official reason cited grave moral charges and political concerns. Chaplin gave an interview from the ship, and his response sealed his fate. He said he wouldn't return to a country of fear and persecution. That quote ended any possibility of reconciliation. Chaplin, who'd lived in America for nearly 40 years, who'd created some of the most beloved American films ever made, was essentially exiled. He lost access to his United Artists assets. He lost his Hollywood connections. He lost the American market. He settled in Switzerland and didn't return to the United States for 20 years. In 1972, at age 83, he finally returned to accept an honorary Oscar. The Academy's gesture was meant as reconciliation, but by then Chaplin had spent 2 decades in exile during what should have been the peak of his creative powers. He passed away in Switzerland in 1977 at age 88. One of cinema's greatest geniuses, punished not for crimes but for words spoken in interviews during an era of political conformity. The greatest entertainer of his generation, destroyed by his own refusal to stay silent. His story remains the ultimate cautionary tale about the price of speaking your mind in the wrong moment, to the wrong people, in the wrong era. 7 careers, 7 interviews, 7 moments when honesty, arrogance, or defiance proved more dangerous than any scandal the tabloids could invent. In Hollywood's golden age, the studio system could survive affairs, substance issues, even criminal trials, but it couldn't survive actors who spoke their minds at the wrong moment. What separates these stories from modern celebrity controversies is the permanence of the damage. No apology tour, no PR rehabilitation, no social media statement could undo what was said. The words lived forever in print, and the industry never forgot. Which interview do you think was most career-destroying? Would any of these actors survive today's cancel culture, or was the studio system even less forgiving? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden era. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.